Hello and welcome to Digital Signage Explored. My name is Tim, and joining me today is Matt Steedman, co-founder at Ant. Thank you very much, Matt, for joining.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Appreciate you trying to carve out some time. It's obviously a little bit harder for us to get on the same time frame, given you're way down on the other side of the world. How are you? Are you good?
Great. Yeah, couldn't be better. Having a great start to the year. It's already April and feels like we're already at Christmas time.
What happened? Like it vanished.
Yeah.
Although in England we haven't had any good weather, it's still just totally miserable. It's 1 degree outside
Yeah.
and raining.
I won't comment on the weather then. Weather's been
Yeah, please
spectacular.
don't.
So I won't go there.
Yeah, please leave the Australian beautiful weather out of it. We'll go crack straight onto the subject. So the discussion today was going to be around data and menu boards. Obviously, AMP deals a lot with QSR and menus. And have you seen a kind of shift in customer behavior in terms of what they're asking you for when it comes to digital signage?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, connected and sort of converged systems are really starting to kick off on, I guess, really coming to the forefront of discussions and requirements for most big vendors, big customers. And it's really about just streamlining the processes and those sort of things to capture and display data that's coming off central databases such as point of sale, those sort of systems. And it's really becoming an essential item, not a nice to have. It's becoming really essential. So we're definitely seeing that shift to the live data on boards for sure.
Do you think there's a particular reason why that's becoming more prevalent? Is it just that the technology's there now, or people are trying to streamline staffing?
Look, it's probably I'd say it's a combination of all of the above. I think it's really the technology is now becoming more cost effective. It's becoming much easier to manage, much easier to roll out. You've got obviously bigger and better things happening in the technology space. So people are seeing more of it out there. So you've got more adoption in the market, which means more people are seeing things out and going, well, hang on, I want that. And so you'll see some of the bigger players that have been doing it for a little while. You'll now start seeing that now stepping down to a lot of the other, I guess, providers of the lovely quick service restaurant goods. So they're wanting to sort of get there, have that experience of the customer a little bit more seamless, which means having things live, having things up to date, not having things expired on screen. And I think that's really important. It's becoming way more important for operations and marketing and all of the teams. So once all of the teams want it, you tend to see a lot more adoption. It's when one team wants it and they have to convince 5 other teams. That's the harder ask. But when everyone goes, hey, I think we really all do need this, it's going to be great for capturing data, making sure things are live,
So
making sure things are up to date. And
you
it really
mentioned the
becomes,
teams there.
yeah.
Well, you mentioned the teams there. What teams tend to get involved in that conversation?
Everyone from IT, operations, marketing, they're the 3 main that we see. And then you obviously have your management who push obviously the big picture ideas, and then obviously that flows down to the teams to work out how to do those tasks. So we often get involved in sort of all three or four of those levels at either really senior management all the way down to sometimes, I don't say down to IT, but sometimes IT is the ones who have to make it happen. So we speak their language and obviously know how to tackle it from any of those sort of areas.
I do think that's really interesting, as you mentioned before, is that you've got these individual groups where the larger entities have a little bit more wiggle room in terms of spend, and they've got their experimental funding to some extent, which is where this many years ago now started of could we make this more cost effective? Could we get data pulled from our POS systems? And the second they validate that it is possible and it becomes more cost effective, or there's an additional benefit around that, you see the smaller kind of maybe not singular shops or singular QSR locations, but those with 20, 30, 40, 50 start to dive into that. Have you seen the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of we call smaller QSRs are definitely starting to not only sort of, they're talking about it as though they know it's happening. It seems like the market's getting more educated in that space, the smaller space, which I think is great. Things like, some of the point of sales, the entry level point of sales are actually quite easy to integrate with. So that does make things a little easier. There's definitely seeing a shift in all levels of QSR to that live data from not quite the single shops, but to sort of 5 to 10 sites and up. I definitely asking if it's possible.
That was going to be something I was going to ask you about, actually, because obviously we work in digital signage very, very focused on that territory. So when it comes to POS systems, I know very little. But I think when we've had conversations way back when I was working on a commercial side, would be that people would be asking for an integration and they would mention XYZ POS system, but there wasn't a lot of unified way of accessing that data without a huge amount of development. Do you feel like that's changing, right?
Well, you do have, I mean, all point of sale systems are different, which is there's no real standard, so to speak. They're all using APIs, which are across the board development ready to a degree. It's really about a lot of it's about workflows and user flows and how it's actually going to be pulled rather than how it's just pulling a tabular data down. I mean, for example, 20 years ago, or not quite 20 years ago, probably 15 years ago, we're pulling live data in digital signage off SQL databases because it was very easy. That was an IT task. And it was usually a local server. You pull the data off, super easy. Now you've got API integrations that are all different. You've got multiple different technologies to try and tap into as far as database structures, etc. So it is a little bit complicated, but it's getting easier in the fact that I would say companies are sort of starting to get more similar in the way they approach their data structure. I hope.
And you feel
That's the
like
way it's going.
there's a level of there's not quite as much fear around those integrations as there were, so people are more kind of willing to get stuck in with that.
Yeah, I think there's more companies in our system integration, in the system integrator world. I think are becoming more comfortable with that integration as well, rather than relying on the customer to do that integration potentially in-house if they're big enough. So if it becomes, and you've got data services that can do those integrations now as well. So they're becoming more and more spread and more, I guess, more adaptable across those different POS providers, which is also a great thing because that means people don't get left behind. It really comes down to, there's a couple of factors. There's quite a few factors in that, but otherwise, generally speaking, it's getting easier.
The other thing I did want to ask you about is around franchisees, because I think of all of the different businesses out there, QSRs tend to be the ones that are most run in a franchise model. Just
Yes.
because it's about location, it's about profitability, it's about trying to get the market share up there from the brand. Do you feel like there's an added benefit to running with data from a franchise model rather than it being like just a singularly owned entity?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And especially if the franchise group, for example, is wanting to dictate and help run the financial models for all the different products they're selling, then yes, absolutely. Having that centralized data or point of sale data that's dictating what's on the screens with maybe some room for manipulation from the local guys, that's something that could really help because a lot of the franchise groups we've seen, you'll have things like localized data or localized pricing, for example, whereas the company ones, obviously they spread that company data out still based on location. So you obviously, a country like Australia has got different pricing zones for some customers it's unified. So it can depend on things like supply and demand of products or services. How obviously Western Australia is a long way away from everywhere else. So if it has to get shipped, you've got some shipping costs.
Yes.
It's another country
Absolutely.
away.
I think it's the affluency is interesting as well, because I think I actually used to work within a franchise a little while ago now, a long time ago. You do have as a struggle internally the need to satisfy the franchisee in terms of they've obviously purchased into a business model. They want to be able to follow certain brand guidelines. They want to get the value of being part of that franchise group, but they also want to feel a little bit of autonomy. They want to be able to make some decisions themselves, and that gives the franchisor a lot more freedom, being like, here's the boundaries of what you can change. You can choose between these 15 different specials, as an example, test out what works in your market, and then choose that. And the brilliance of having that all run in the digital signage based on the POS system is you only need to make one change and one decision once, right? And then it just delivers out your messaging holistically across the digital signage. Maybe it touches your newsletters, maybe it touches your offer apps. All of that just happens in unison.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the key to it, really, is that centralized data and being that central point of truth, which gets updated and shared around those different platforms as you mentioned. And that's really becoming, as you've got like probably ordering apps and those sort of technologies have really fueled it as well from a holistic point of view. Menu boards are great for internal, obviously, and great for drive-through. They're great for promotions, attracting customers, say, into a physical business. And you've also got that external data that's required to be synchronized on occasion, maybe social media, websites, those sort of things. We can all link up through that centralized data with tools. So it's becoming very demand driven from franchisors and also individual businesses. But we've definitely seen that pick up.
And that was another thing I was going to ask you about, obviously, just in terms of QSR, moving away from the franchise orders being more general, but
Yep.
In terms of the content delivery, do you tend to work a lot with customers who are moving from non-digital signage to digital signage for the first time?
Yeah, yes, we still are. We still are for sure. There's not as many, but the adoption
Okay,
rates in
interesting.
Australia are quite high, even with smaller businesses. Everyone's seeing it around the place. I mean, it's very rare you go to QSR now anywhere and don't see at least even an attempt at a digital sign, whether it's some very small place putting some TVs in that'll last 6 months.
Yeah.
They'll give it a go. And then they might
And
come
so
after
they
six
tried.
months and go, hang on, we need a proper option that's actually going to work long term. So we see, yeah, you definitely still see greenfields ops, I guess. Yeah, definitely.
That's really interesting. I'd never really considered that posing that question before, but I think I'll ask it going forward because it is interesting to see the skew. Because probably 10 years ago it was less prominent, but now it's QSR is its own vertical is very specific because I think there's a mentality of you've got the really big players and you kind of see a trickle down all the way down to the bottom of going, well, the big players are doing this. If we could emulate this, then we see the same success.
Yeah. Look, I actually I think you're going to start to see some of the smaller middle tiers take over the big guys. They might move a bit faster. It's something that could easily happen in the next 6 to 12 months.
Are you thinking like more kind of unique offerings or just the
Yeah,
fact that
faster
the
to
big
market,
players?
faster to market options. I think what's coming out in the market for smaller mediums, the big boys are playing in already. Those technologies are becoming more available for anyone, and they're becoming more cost effective. With things like order confirmation, live data on menu boards for drive-throughs, all that sort of stuff. They're things that were kind of really for the top end of town, and it's now becoming available for small to medium groups, and it's accessible. It's not a specialist field, but it's not something that's not so exclusive to those companies because of cost. Cost comparisons are coming down.
That would be an interesting take on that because obviously as those costs and the barriers to entry get reduced to utilize all this kind of digital technology for QSR, the bigger players are actually going to struggle because they need their approval process for any of that
Yeah.
technology is far longer, right?
Oh,
They've
right.
got infrastructure, they've got
Yep.
IT departments and teams and compliance teams and all this kind of stuff they have to go through before they can even get a proof of concept up and running.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
interesting.
And
So
that's where
potentially an
you see,
opportunity.
yeah, you see a bit of a slingshot in the market in that respect because it's potential to see it anyway. Because with it being an ease to access and the price point, and then smaller groups make faster decisions because they're a little bit more nimble. That's where you can see a little bit of that leapfrogging occasionally. Is when early adopters can go, oh, like a lot of the AI stuff and all the stuff that's new to market. You'll see the smaller guys just adopt and try it quite quickly across all kinds of businesses, not just quick service restaurants, but trying out AI driven apps and bits and pieces like that because you can. Whether or not it actually has a benefit, that's probably time to tell. But smaller is more nimble, but obviously they have less risk to doing those changes. So that's where it comes down to.
Well, that was actually going to be my kind of closing question for you, which you've nicely kind of slid into, which is around AI. Obviously, there's a lot of AI conversation. I almost have to ask the question in this show because as a soundbite, it's great. But
Yeah.
what do you think? What do you think AI will be doing in QSR in 5 years? Do you feel like there's a place for it? Do you think it's just a fad? What's your interpretation?
Um, it will have a place, absolutely. I think it's really how soon and who the first adopters are. I mean, you're seeing it on, say, ordering systems. So that's the first place I've seen it actually come to market. So kiosk ordering, drive-through ordering, that's the first place I think you'll see it.
I was down at the retail show in Olympia yesterday, and SodaClick and
Yeah,
Advantech had a setup there which they were demonstrating, and it worked. From what I saw, it worked great. I did seem to work as expected, and from a QSR perspective, from a bottom line perspective, people want things to become cheaper.
yeah,
The way you would do it is you would remove the employees that have to stand there, in
yeah.
essence.
And that'll be the first driver of AI in business is always cost. For cost saving, you
Yeah,
can do it.
totally.
Cost saving, and then probably things like the user experience as well. And it has to be really good. I mean, that's the thing with adopting things in drive-through, for example. If you're replacing, not I shouldn't say replace, it's a terrible word, but if you're enhancing the service by putting an AI in there for, say, queue management for a drive-through, where somebody like the big burger joints, I won't name
Yeah,
them.
you know who they are.
Yeah, we know who they are. They've been around for a long time. They spend a lot of money in this area from what you read online. And if you can manage that queue effectively by using AI ordering, getting the prompts of saying, what would you like? And they'll do upsells. They'll do, is that all you want? Is there anything else we can get you? Obviously it'll help display the data on there because it's crunching the things behind it. That's the kind of AI that will probably, I would say, would be the first to market. There might also be some areas where it touches things like content creation, automatic content creation, background images. Obviously, you're seeing the technologies with video creation and image creation. Those two sort of things are probably where you might see it in digital signage, because obviously they're the two pieces of content that are the most popular. How that's going to work, that's probably, and will you still need a human to go and check that AI hasn't made a person with 9 legs and 5 arms?
I think you always end up with that, like, you end up with like a curator, someone who sits in the middle to make sure that AI hasn't had a wobbly one and, just about to send out something incredibly offensive. You just never know.
Yeah.
One area that I do think that AI could take a huge benefit for QSR and digital signage is like kind of data analytics of what's been selling, what needs to be shipped places, what needs to be on offer, what indicates changes in preference for certain meals. Is it seasonal? Is it just ingesting this incredible amount of data and just spitting out what should be on the screen at that given time is something else that could definitely benefit.
Yeah. Absolutely. Scheduling and monitoring the stock levels, etc. Like that's absolutely the way we used to do it. Mentioned before with the SQL days, is that we would have a rule-based layers in there that would say if the stock got below 10, you stop promoting it on the menu.
Right.
And then it was really simple stuff. But I imagine in the background, if you've got thousands of sites, for example, and you've got hundreds of SKUs, you can't really do that with simple line by line rule based like that, because it's not manageable. So if you could train AI to say, look across the board, what's the weather, what's the stock levels, what's this, what's that, then make up a decision on what to play, for example, on screen.
Yeah, and you can feed it all that data and say, okay, well, listen, we're going to try and sell burger X, and we're going to try and upsell it with drink Y, and then figure out which one has the most likelihood of succeeding, and then we're just going to stick with that as our offer. So all of the psychology behind human purchasing can be put into our machine, and it will just figure out us better than we do. It just goes, Tim's turning up again. I know if I offer him a milkshake, he's going to crumble. It's the kind of level of knowledge we'll get to eventually.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, look, they're doing it. They've proved they can manipulate that stuff with social media. So there's no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not that that's a positive, but I'm not.
We need to discuss the future rather than pass judgment on it personally, because it's different.
Yeah,
it's cool. We'll see. It's all depends on what happens in the future, doesn't it?
It does.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you staying up and jumping on the call with me today.
No problem. Anytime.
Where can people find you?
Well, they can look us up on LinkedIn or on our website at digital.com.au. Get there. Obviously, I'm on LinkedIn. You can look me up if you need to contact me and talk about anything. Yeah, digital signage, QSR. Yeah, love to have a chat.
Thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, mate. Bye.